The silence in the advanced placement chemistry lab at Oak Creek High School was never peaceful. It was the heavy, loaded quiet of a battlefield before the first shot is fired. For 17-year-old Amara Johnson, this room was her sanctuary. Here, the immutable laws of science outweighed the chaotic, often cruel, social hierarchy of the outside world. Here, a reaction was just a reaction, no matter who poured the chemicals. Or so she tried to tell herself. Her sneakers were still damp from the soda Chase Henderson had accidentally spilled on them in the cafeteria line that morning. The sticky residue was a fresh reminder of her place in the ecosystem of Oak Creek High, invisible until it was time to be a target. She was new, having moved to the small, affluent town over the summer after her mother landed a job at the local hospital. With her dark skin, quiet intelligence, and thrift store clothes, she was an immediate outsider dot as she hunched over her lab station. Meticulously adjusting the calibration on a spectrophotometer, the door swung open with a violent thud. Chase Henderson prowled in, his varsity jacket a symbol of a status he wore like armor. He didn't walk. He occupied space, his presence demanding submission. His gaze, lazy and predatory, swept the room before landing on her. He didn't say anything, just smirked as he passed her table, his shoulder knocking a carefully arranged set of beakers. One tipped, splashing distilled water across her notes. "Clumsy," he muttered, not breaking stride. Amara's hands clenched, but she didn't look up. She focused on the slow, steady drip from the burette, a single tear of liquid defiance in a world determined to see her spill. The bullying was rarely overt. It was a series of paper cuts, her locker jammed with mysterious glue, her name whispered with a sneer in the hallways, group projects where she did all the work only to be listed last. The ringleader was Chase, but he had lieutenants. Sarah, a queen bee with a venomous smile, would lose the permission slips Amara needed for the science club field trip. Mark, a hulking football player, would accidentally bump into her, sending her books flying. The first major conflict happened in Mr. Davies' history class. They were debating Brown v. Board of Education, and Amara, her voice initially hesitant, began to speak about the lingering shadows of segregation in school funding and resource allocation. She was finding her rhythm, her words gaining strength when Chase cut her off. "Is that why you're here?" he asked, his tone dripping with fake curiosity. "To teach us how oppressed you are. We get it. You think you deserve a spot here more than we do because of, what, history?" The class tittered nervously. Mr. Davies, a man with a perpetually weary expression, simply said, "Let's keep the discussion civil," and moved on. Amara felt the heat of a dozen eyes on her, the validity of her argument, her very presence, reduced to a punchline. She sank into her seat, the fight gone out of her, replaced by a cold, hard knot of shame. The isolation became a physical weight. She ate lunch alone in the library, the hushed tones a stark contrast to the roaring cafeteria she avoided. The rumors started then, subtle and insidious. Whispers that she'd only gotten into the AP classes because of affirmative action, that her single mother knew people on the school board. Sarah made a show of clutching her purse tighter when Amara walked by. Her only flicker of support came from an unexpected place. Liam, a quiet boy from her chemistry class who wore band t-shirts and had a sharp, cynical wit. One afternoon, as she was trying to scrub scholarship case off her locker with a wet napkin, he stopped. "Don't use water," he said, handing her a bottle of hand sanitizer. "The alcohol breaks down the marker." It was a small act, but in the desert of her high school experience, it felt like a monsoon. He didn't offer pity, just a practical solution. They started studying together sometimes, and for a few hours a week, the constant pressure would ease. But Liam was an outlier, and his friendship made her more of a target to those who saw kindness as a weakness. The breaking point was the history fair. Amara's project, redlining and its legacy in Oak Creek, was a meticulously researched masterpiece. She'd spent months in the local archives, mapping how decades-old discriminatory housing policies still dictated the quality of schools and public services across town. It was powerful, undeniable, and it directly implicated the families of several powerful people, including Chase's, who had profited from those very policies. The day before the fair, she was setting up her trifold display in the gym when Chase and his friends sauntered in. "Still trying to make us feel guilty for existing, Johnson?" he jeered. She ignored him, focusing on aligning a timeline. That's when he tripped. His foot caught the leg of her display table, and the entire structure wobbled, then crashed to the floor. Posters ripped, carefully crafted models shattered. "Oops," Chase said, his eyes gleaming with malice. "My bad." The teacher supervising, Coach Miller, sighed. "Just clean it up, Amara. Accidents happen." She stood amidst the wreckage of months of work, her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. She was not allowed to excel. She was not allowed to tell the truth. She knelt, gathering the broken pieces, her vision blurring with tears she refused to shed. That night, sitting on her bedroom floor surrounded by the ruins of her project, the sadness finally burned away, replaced by a white-hot fury. They couldn't break her. They could only make her stronger. She wouldn't cry. She would fight. But she was smart. She knew a direct confrontation would only get her labeled as aggressive. She needed evidence. She started carrying her phone in her pocket, its voice memo app always at the ready. She began documenting everything. The whispered insults, the accidental shoves, the times her work was sabotaged. She kept a hidden log, times, dates, witnesses. Liam, seeing her newfound determination, became her silent ally, confirming incidents and keeping an eye out. Amara was no longer just a victim. She was a collector of truths, building a case against her tormentors. The turning point came when she decided to take her evidence to the principal, Dr. Evans. She laid it all out in his office. The recordings, the log, Liam's signed statement about the history fair. Dr. Evans, a man with a placid face and a weak handshake, listened, steepling his fingers. When she finished, he sighed. "Amara, I see you're upset, but these are serious accusations against some of our most prominent students. We must consider the context. Are you sure you're not misinterpreting some playful teasing? We pride ourselves on a positive environment here." He was dismissing her, protecting them. The system wasn't just ignoring the bullying. It was complicit. As she left his office, defeated, she saw Chase leaning against the wall outside, a triumphant smirk on his face. He'd known she would come here. He'd known nothing would happen. The message was clear. The rules didn't apply to him. But Amara had one last card to play. As she walked away, her thumb hovered over the send button on her phone. She had emailed the entire dossier, every recording and photograph, to her personal email and to her mother. It was time to go over Dr. Evans's head. The state history fair was held at the county courthouse. Against all odds, Amara had rebuilt her project, her presentation sharper and more damning than ever. As she spoke before the judges, her voice was clear and confident, her evidence irrefutable. She saw Chase and his father, a stern-looking man in an expensive suit, watching from the back of the room. The man's name was Judge Henderson. During the Q&A, one judge, an older woman, praised Amara's courage. Judge Henderson stepped forward, interrupting. "This isn't courage. It's slander," he boomed, his voice echoing in the marble hall. "This presentation is a one-sided, inflammatory attack on upstanding families who have built this community. It's filled with unsubstantiated claims." He turned his cold gaze on Amara. "Young lady, you should be careful. Defamation is a serious matter. I can hold you in contempt right here." The threat hung in the air, naked and terrifying. The other judges looked uncomfortable. Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The full weight of the system was coming down to crush her. But as Judge Henderson took a step closer, a new voice cut through the tension. "I'd be very careful about threatening my daughter, William." Every head turned. Standing in the doorway of the courtroom was a tall, broad-shouldered man in an impeccably tailored suit. He had a quiet authority that instantly commanded the room. It was Amara's father, Robert. He was supposed to be in Washington, D.C. Judge Henderson's face went pale. "Robert?" he stammered. "What are you?" Robert Chamberlain walked calmly to his daughter's side, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "I'm here to see my daughter present her award-winning project," he said, his voice calm but firm. He looked at Judge Henderson. "And it seems I arrived just in time to witness a sitting judge attempting to intimidate a minor during an academic competition. That's a rather serious abuse of power, don't you think?" The room was utterly silent. The hierarchy had just been inverted. The fallout was swift and decisive. With the U.S. Attorney General personally taking an interest, an investigation was launched. The recordings Amara made were entered into evidence, revealing not just the student's cruelty, but the principal's willful negligence. Judge Henderson was suspended from the bench pending a judicial conduct review. Chase and his friends faced serious disciplinary action, including suspension from the football team and mandatory community service at school. The atmosphere shifted overnight. Teachers who had looked the other way now made a point of including Amara. Students who had been silent bystanders offered hesitant apologies. She learned that courage was contagious. A few other students came forward with their own stories of bullying, now confident they would be heard. On the last day of school, Amara stood by her locker, now free of graffiti. Liam stopped by. "Looks like you changed the world," he said with a small smile. "Not the world," Amara replied, looking around the hallway. "Just my small corner of it." She had learned that power isn't always about title or money. Sometimes it's about the quiet, unshakable courage to speak your truth, to document the injustice, and to refuse to be broken. She hadn't just survived. She had rewritten the rules. The reflection looking back at her from the polished locker was no longer that of a victim, but of a survivor, a fighter, and a girl who had finally found her voice. And she knew, with a deep, unshakable certainty, that she would never let anyone silence it again.